The first sign that something was wrong should have been the silence of the crows. I stood on the creaking wooden porch of my rented house, keys in hand, and looked out over the yard. It was a Tuesday in late October, the time of day when the afternoon is just beginning to think about giving way to evening. The sky over Coldwater County was the color of faded denim, and a cold wind, smelling of distant rain and decaying leaves, swept down from the Whisper Ridge Mountains. The aspen trees at the edge of my property shivered, their golden leaves rattling like 1,000 tiny dry bones. I was leaving. My assignment for the Chicago Chronicle was done. A simple, forgettable piece on the county's annual pumpkin festival, and the city, with its bright lights and anonymous crowds, was calling me home. I threw my duffel bag into the passenger seat of my sedan, the car door slamming shut with a sound that was too loud in the quiet. That was the second sign. Coldwater was never this quiet. Even on the outskirts of town, you could usually hear the distant groan of Old Man Henderson's tractor or the laughter of kids playing in the creek. Now, there was only the wind. I got in, turned the key, and the engine purred to life, a familiar, comforting sound. I checked my phone. No service, which was typical for this valley. I'd have a signal once I got over the ridge and onto the interstate. The gravel of my driveway crunched under the tires as I pulled out, turning onto the 2-lane blacktop of Old Mill Road. This was the only road out of this particular hollow, a 5-mile ribbon of cracked pavement that wound its way through a dense forest of oak and pine before connecting with State Route 38. Route 38 would then take me east, up and over the ridge, and out of Coldwater County for good. I drove with the window down, the cold air biting at my cheek. The forest pressed in on both sides, a tangled wall of shadows and late autumn color. The smell of pine resin was thick and clean. I settled in for the drive, my mind already in my Chicago apartment, planning the Thai food I would order. The trees were a blur of brown and orange. I passed the rusted shell of a '57 Chevy that marked the halfway point to the highway. I glanced at my odometer. I'd been driving for about 4 minutes. I should be seeing the old wooden bridge over Cooper's Creek soon. I kept driving. The road curved to the left, then sharply to the right. My fingers tapped on the steering wheel. The bridge should be right here, but the road just straightened out again, the forest looking unfamiliar. I frowned, slowing down. Maybe I just misjudged the distance. A few minutes later, a knot of cold dread began to form in my stomach. There, on the right side of the road, was the '57 Chevy. I had passed it again. I pulled the car over to the shoulder and put it in park, the engine still running. This was impossible. I hadn't turned around. The road was a straight shot out with no turnoffs for 5 miles. I looked at the Chevy, its windows empty, its interior filled with a small mountain of brown leaves. I had definitely passed it. I was sure of it. I took a deep breath, my journalist's mind trying to find a logical explanation. Stress fatigue? A fugue state? I shook my head. I felt perfectly alert. I decided I must have gotten turned around somehow on one of the curves. It was a silly mistake, but the mind could play tricks. I put the car back in drive and continued on, this time paying closer attention. I noted a particular lightning-struck pine, its trunk split clean down the middle. Past it, I noted a mailbox shaped like a trout, belonging to the Riley family. Past it, the road began to feel longer than it should, the curves more sinuous. The light was starting to fade, the blue of the sky deepening to a bruised purple. I switched on my headlights, and then the twin beams illuminated the same rusted Chevy. I was back at my starting point. A jolt of pure, undiluted fear shot through me. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding slightly on the gravel shoulder. My heart was hammering against my ribs. This wasn't right. This wasn't possible. I sat there for a full minute, just breathing, trying to calm the frantic rhythm of my pulse. Instinct told me to panic, to floor the gas pedal and scream down this road until it made sense. But a deeper, calmer part of me, the part that had navigated city riots and political scandals, knew that panic was the enemy. I needed to observe. I needed to think. I turned the car around and drove back the way I had come, this time at a crawl. Maybe I had missed a turn, but there were no turns. The forest was an unbroken wall. After a few minutes of this slow, deliberate driving, My headlights swept across my own mailbox. I was back at my own house. The porch light was on, a lone, yellow eye in the gathering twilight. I had not turned onto my driveway. I had been on the main road, and now I was home. I didn't get out of the car. I just stared at the familiar, slightly sagging structure, a cold sweat prickling on the back of my neck. This was beyond a wrong turn. This was a violation of physics, of geography, of reality itself. I thought about my phone. Still no service. I was utterly alone. The wind had picked up, and it moaned through the eaves of the house, a lonely, desolate sound. I made a decision. I would try Route 38 from the other direction. Instead of taking Old Mill Road to get to it, I would drive into the town of Coldwater itself and pick up the highway from the town square. It was a longer route, but it was a different road. It had to work. I drove back down Old Mill Road, past the Chevy again, I refused to look at it, and into the sleepy main street of Coldwater. The town was quiet, but it was a normal quiet. A few pickup trucks were parked outside of Dot's Diner, and the lights were on in the library. Felt real, felt solid. I drove past the courthouse, its white clock tower reading 5:45 p.m., and turned onto Elm Street, which would become Route 38. The road began its gentle ascent into the foothills. The forest here was thinner, more populated with scattered farmhouses and fenced pastures. I saw a man on a tractor in a distant field, and the sight of another human being filled me with a profound sense of relief. I was just tired. It had all been in my head. I pressed down on the accelerator, feeling the car strain as the incline grew steeper. The sun was gone now, and true night was falling fast. My headlights cut a swath through the darkness, illuminating the yellow center line. I passed a sign that read, "Leaving Coldwater County. Come back soon." A wave of relief so powerful it was almost dizzying washed over me. I had done it. I was out. I drove for another 10 minutes, the road winding higher. I should have been seeing the glow of the interstate in the distance by now, but there was only darkness. The farmhouses had thinned out, and the forest was closing in again. That didn't seem right. I knew this road. There should be a scenic overlook coming up on the left. I slowed, peering into the gloom. And then, my headlights caught something on the side of the road. It was a mailbox shaped like a trout. My blood ran cold. I stomped on the brake, the car lurching to a halt. No, it wasn't possible. I was on Route 38. I was miles from the Riley place. I looked past the mailbox, and there was their farmhouse, its windows dark. I had not taken any turns. I had not gotten lost. I had driven in a straight line up a mountain and ended up back in the valley. I put my head in my hands, a low groan escaping my lips. This was real. This was happening. Fear was now a living thing in the car with me, a cold, coiling serpent in my gut. I had to get out. I had to walk. Car was a machine bound by roads, but a man on foot could go anywhere. He could cut through the woods, climb over the ridge. I pulled the car onto a wide spot on the shoulder, grabbed my backpack from the duffel bag, and filled it with a bottle of water, a flashlight, and a lightweight jacket. I left the car running, its headlights pointing uselessly into the trees, and I started walking. I wouldn't follow the road. I would go straight up. Whisper Ridge loomed above, a dark silhouette against a starless sky. I found a game trail at the edge of the forest and started climbing. The air was much colder now, and the wind bit through my jacket. The beam of my flashlight was a small, fragile world of light in an ocean of darkness. The forest floor was a thick carpet of leaves, slick and wet, and every step was an effort. Twigs snapped under my boots, the sounds sharp and loud. I could smell the damp earth, the fungus on rotting logs, the sharp, wild scent of the pines. I walked for what felt like an hour, my lungs burning with the effort of the climb. I was a city journalist, not a woodsman. My muscles screamed in protest. I paused, leaning against a massive oak tree, its bark rough and cold against my palm. I shone my light around. Every direction looked the same, a dense lattice of tree trunks and shadows. I listened. The wind sighed in the high branches. An owl hooted, a low, mournful sound that seemed to echo the dread in my own heart. I checked my phone again. Nothing. The screen was a blank black eye. I pushed on, driven by a desperate need to see the other side of the ridge. I had to break the line of sight with this cursed valley. I climbed over a fallen log, my hands sinking into the soft, spongy wood. As I straightened up on the other side, my flashlight beam swept across something man-made. It was a fence post, and tied to it was a faded red ribbon. My heart stopped. It was the ribbon I had tied there myself last summer to mark the boundary of my own property. I was standing in my own backyard. I didn't scream. I didn't run. A profound and utter exhaustion settled over me, heavier than any fatigue I had ever known. I walked slowly out of the tree line and into my backyard. The porch light was still on. My car was now sitting in the driveway, exactly where I had left it hours ago, though I had abandoned it miles away on Route 38. I walked to the porch and sat on the top step, dropping my backpack beside me. The wind rustled the dry stalks of the untended garden. I was trapped. The thought was no longer frantic, but a simple, stark, and undeniable fact. As I sat there in the dark, a memory surfaced. An old-timer in Dot's Diner, a man named Eli, had said something to me a few weeks ago. I'd been interviewing locals for my pumpkin festival piece, and he'd been sipping his coffee, his eyes cloudy with age. "Folks don't much leave Coldwater," he'd said, his voice a dry rasp. "Oh, they try. They get that restless feeling, pack their bags, and head for the hills. But the hills, they have a way of disagreeing. The land here, it holds on to what it loves." I had written it off as quaint, small-town superstition. Now, I understood it was a statement of fact. The following days blurred into a strange, quiet nightmare. I tried to leave twice more. Once on foot, following the creek bed that everyone said eventually led to the next county. I walked until my feet were blistered and raw, only to step out of a thicket of brambles and find myself looking at the back of Dot's Diner. The second time, I tried driving at dawn, thinking the morning light might reveal some hidden turn I had missed. Didn't. I ended up back at my house just as the sun cleared the ridge, its light doing nothing to warm the chill in my soul. I learned to stop trying. The panic subsided, replaced by a low-grade, constant hum of acceptance. I took walks. I learned the rhythms of the land. I saw a black bear one afternoon, a huge, shaggy creature ambling through the trees 100 yards away. It paused, lifted its head and sniffed the air in my direction, then continued on its way, completely unconcerned by my presence. It belonged here. I was beginning to understand that I did, too. One evening, I was sitting on my porch, watching the bats flit through the twilight, when a pickup truck I recognized pulled into my driveway. It was Sheriff Miller. He got out, his boots crunching on the gravel, and tipped his hat to me. "Heard you decided to stick around," he said, his voice calm. He didn't ask why my car had been found abandoned on Route 38. He didn't seem surprised to see me. I just nodded, looking out at the darkening woods. Seems the county had other plans for me. He came and stood beside me, leaning against the porch rail. "It's not a bad place once you stop fighting it. The land, it's choosy about who it keeps. Must have seen something in you worth keeping." "And what if I don't want to be kept?" I asked, the question sounding hollow even to me. He gave a small, sad smile. "Son, that's a fight you can't win. It's bigger than you, bigger than all of us. Some folks get to leave. Most don't. The ones who stay, well, we learn to find what we need right here." He left soon after, and I was alone again with the sounds of the night. I thought about my life in Chicago, the constant noise, the frantic pace, the shallow connections. I had always felt a restless anxiety there, a feeling of being out of place that I had mistaken for ambition. Here, the anxiety was different, a physical prison, but the feeling of being out of place was gone. In its place was a strange, reluctant sense of belonging. The lesson was not one I would have ever chosen to learn. It was forced upon me by the silent, immutable will of the land itself. I had come to Coldwater County as a visitor, a passerby, a ghost. The land had decided I was more than that. It had decided I was part of it. My desire, my will, my plans, they were irrelevant. There is a peace that comes from surrender, not the surrender of giving up, but the surrender of finally understanding your place in a system much larger and more ancient than yourself. The roads don't lead out of Coldwater County. They are a loop, a circle, an embrace. And I am here, writing a different story now, one that doesn't end with me leaving. It begins with me staying. No one leaves Coldwater County, and eventually you stop wanting to.